Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Lovely to see you. Welcome to Helen. Thank you for joining us. Do you know anything about mindfulness at all?
I've read a book.
You've read a book? Mm-hmm. Was it a book about mindfulness?
Yes. Yeah, I read the book. I've read it a couple of times and kept thinking, had a CD in the back of it, listened to it, meditations.
And how did you find it? Was it accessible?
I didn't actually do the meditation, just, it's one of those things. I'd like to have time to do this, and I never have time to do it.
Okay.
And I thought if I'm with other people, then I might actually put my mind to it.
Good. Well, yes, certainly coming together as a group helps. I think everybody has said that they find it beneficial to come together as a group. And hopefully the other thing that the group and the way that we do things will help is that I'm a big believer in the fact that whilst it's very nice if you can dedicate an hour or however long is you feel is necessary to meditate and be mindful, it's not that easy, as you've just said. It's not easy to fit it in when you've got busy lives. It's very difficult. So one of the things that I aim to encourage people to do is to stop regularly, be mindful all throughout the day in little snapshots, because that then adds up to a whole load of mindfulness that you've achieved throughout the day. And actually you might find the more you practice and the more you do the little exercises and things like that, that actually you've been able to be mindful for an hour, 2 hours throughout the day without having, there are some people that will probably take me to task and say, oh no, you've got to sit for half an hour, you can't possibly develop a thorough mindful practice if you don't sit for at least 2 20-minute sessions every day. And maybe they're right. However, I think that there is definitely a strong argument for saying if you can, just throughout the day, grab as many little snippets, as many little mindful moments as you can, it all adds up. And one of the things that we're going to talk about a bit later on should hopefully qualify that a little bit more. The format, generally, as everybody else is aware, is we have, there's a couple of exercises that we do, maybe another one if I feel so inclined, and then there's always a topic every week, and we have a chat around a topic, and it's all very informal, and you can contribute as much or as little as you wish. The topic for this week is breath. Now I tend to talk about breath quite a lot anyway. One of the exercises that we always do, certainly at the end, is a breath, a meditative breathing exercise. And I often hint and mention the breath, but I thought it would be useful today to perhaps just maybe go over some of the things that we've spoken about before, and also just elaborate on a few elements of it. And there was one thing that came up when I did a session a few weeks ago when we were talking about breath, and there was something that somebody said which I thought was pertinent to just sort of talk about. So we'll mention that later on. We'll start with the exercise that we usually start with, because it's a nice one just to get everybody in the moment. So this is where we engage our senses, and it's the information that we gather in via our senses which tell us where we are in space and time in this moment. It tells us what's going on around us. And as much as mindfulness is about being aware of, not necessarily understanding, but being aware of and accepting what's going on around us, it's also about being aware of and accepting what's going on internally. But we start externally and then we can work our way in. So we begin by just having a look around, just engaging and being aware of our sense of sight, and just seeing. We don't have to make any judgments on what we can see. don't have to label the things we can see, we just see. And then once you've had a look around, you may close your eyes if you wish, and you can turn your awareness to your attention to what you can feel. So you can be aware that you have a head balanced on your neck, which in turn is attached to your shoulders, and you can be aware of your shoulders. Aware that there are these two things attached to your shoulders and the position of those things. Aware of gravity pulling down on those arms. You can be aware of your back, and your back may be in contact with the chair, or you may be sat forward, but you can be aware of your back and aware of your spine. And again, aware of gravity pulling down through the spine. And here it goes down into your bottom, and your bottom is pulled down into the seat. You can be aware of the pressure of your bottom pressing into the seat. Then you can become aware of your legs, position of your legs, bent at the knee, down to your feet in contact with the floor. Aware of gravity pulling those feet down onto the floor. Then you can become aware of the clothes against your skin. And also aware of that faint movement of air. You can feel that on your face, your neck, your hands, your arms if they're exposed. And now smell. Engage the sense of smell and be aware of smell. And then aware of taste. Then finally become aware of sound. And for the next few moments, just listen. Just accept sound as it happens, moment by moment. And if your mind wanders, just bring it back to listening. And it doesn't matter how many times it wanders and you have to bring it back. It may happen once, it may happen 100 times, it doesn't matter. Just practice bringing it back to listening. And the sounds that we hear are not a distraction from being mindful. Those sounds are what are happening now. And so we just are aware of them and accept them. The only thing that can distract us from the present moment, the thoughts and ideas that pop into our head. Which is why when that happens, we just shift the awareness back to listening to the sounds that are happening moment by moment. Got cushions. Would anybody like a cushion? You're all right. Would you like a cushion? You're on a padlock. You're on a cushion, Jess. You're all right. It's just me then. Just me. Okay. So then, the breath. A favourite topic of mine. And if you have read anything about mindfulness, or you've watched any of those mindful gurus on YouTube or wherever, you will have, I'm sure, at some point have read about or heard them talk about your breath and breathing. The breath quite often sits at the heart of many meditations, and certainly some of the meditation that we do centres around the breath. Why is the breath so important? Well, as we have mentioned before, the breath happens in the present moment. We cannot breathe in the past. We cannot breathe in the future. Hopefully we will breathe in the future, and we know that we have taken breaths in the past, otherwise we wouldn't be at this point now. But, those breaths that have happened in the past have happened. We can't retake them, we can't change them. They're done with. The breath, or the breathing that hopefully will happen in the future, it hasn't happened yet. We hope it's going to be there, but ultimately it hasn't happened. The only breath that we can actually be aware of is the breath that is happening right now. And that is when our breath happens, in the present moment. Each breath happens in the present moment. Our breath is obviously intrinsically attached to being alive. As we know, if we're not breathing, then we are not being alive. And the whole purpose of us is to be alive, is to be human beings, to have a life, to experience life. And the breath is absolutely connected to that and central to that. The breath is something that is easy for us to bring our awareness to. It's always there, it's always happening. It's not something that we have to think about. We don't have, it's not something that we have to do in the same way as there are other activities that we do that require us to consciously, make the effort to do them. It happens. Our body and our nervous system and all the rest of it, fantastic system that it is, takes care of that for us. But we can become aware of it. We can be aware of breathing in and breathing out. We can be aware of the movement that is associated with that, the movement that accompanies that breath. So we can be aware of the air entering and leaving the body, we can be aware of the chest expanding and contracting, we can be aware of the diaphragm moving. And because mindfulness is all about awareness, that is something which is very easy for us to bring our awareness to. And it acts like, I've mentioned before, it acts like this metronome in the background, this kind of metronome to our lives. It's this constant. It's always there. And that leads me on to this thing that came up in conversation when I was talking to people before, because I was talking about breath and I was saying all the things that I've just said. And we did a breathing exercise. And I mentioned to the group that the breath that they are taking now is the same breath that they would be taking if they were, had £1 million and were lying in their luxury house, or they had nothing and were, sitting on the floor in a hovel. Regardless of your circumstances, that breath that you are taking is the same. Whether you are in, perfectly fine fettle and good health, or you're experiencing pain and discomfort, the breath is the same breath. So I was mentioning that, and then somebody said, but no, that's not true. My breath is affected by my circumstances. And they quite specifically mentioned money. They mentioned their financial circumstances, and at times in recent history they had experienced financial difficulties, and that caused them an amount of stress and anxiety, and it had an effect on their breathing. They found themselves struggling. They said their breathing was different, their breath was different as a result of their situation. Now, at the time, I didn't answer I didn't respond to their statement particularly well, I don't feel. But I thought, I was giving it some thought subsequently. And I thought, well, was it different? Was their breath actually different? Was it actually affected by their situation? And I don't think it was. If you look at the essential essence of it, their breath wasn't affected. The breath was still happening. They were still breathing in air, and their lungs were processing it. We can look at some of the biological process, but that's kind of irrelevant. They were still breathing in and they were still breathing out, and I'm sure that the pause between breaths was still there, which is obviously something that we have encountered before.
Yeah, but the experience for them was maybe very different.
Exactly. That's it. Their experience of it was different. What was changing, what was different about their breath was the nature of the way their body had responded. The breath itself was the same. The air was going in, the air was going out. The breath was happening in the present moment. Each breath, in turn, following the cycle that it happens, in the moment, that was the same. But what had changed was some physical reaction, some physical response to what was happening in here.
Perhaps, if I might say,
by all means.
the breath was the same, but their breathing was different.
Yes. Their breathing patterns had become affected.
Sometimes if you get palpitations,
Yeah.
your breathing goes all
You do. I'm not immune to moments of anxiety. I have the same pressures as everybody else, and I feel it there. You feel that as if you can't quite catch. You don't feel as if you're quite catching your breath. My breath is not different.
No, it's still there.
My breath is still there. It's still happening in the present moment. The air is still entering and leaving my body. I can still be aware of it in the present moment. Maybe I'm more acutely aware of it because something has impacted upon it. And
the rhythm changes.
The rhythm
That's what you
changes.
become aware of.
Yes. And actually, so what it is that has been altered by that situation. So you find yourself in a situation that causes you stress, causes you anxiety, causes you to have particular thoughts. Oh, I can't cope, or this is always happening to me, this is so unfair, blah, blah, blah. Whatever those thoughts might be. What actually happens is there is a muscular response, the muscles that make the breathing happen respond to those. So whether that's, whether if you're having a panic attack and you start hyperventilating, the breath is still the same. The breath is still happening in the present moment. But you've had a physical response to the thoughts and the ideas that are happening in your head. So your breathing pattern, as a result of this physical response to thoughts and ideas, is what has changed.
I don't know about it, but I don't think about breathing. It's not something I give any thought to at all.
No, you don't need to. No, exactly.
Until something goes wrong and you become aware that it's not doing what it normally does.
Something happened to me today, actually. I was driving back from work I was down Tennyson, down that way, and I had the window open in the van, and they must have been muck sprayed in it. Something like that, and then I was just sitting there driving sort of thing, and then I stopped breathing. I decided to not take, and it was just sort of just lying there, and I just took maybe a shallow breath, but I decided not to take it in. So that was a different breath, but I was aware of it.
But that was a conscious thing.
Yes, it was.
It's funny, isn't it, how, kind of coming back to what you were just saying, Carol, about how you don't know, sometimes you don't become aware of something until it's become disrupted.
That's right.
And that's often the case. That's often the case with our bodies, physically. We take it for granted when they're working perfectly well. But then as soon as we, eat our dinner too fast, and we get that bit of heartburn or something, we go, oh dear, or you stub your toe and it's throbbing. That's when you become aware of it, or it's something more serious happens. It's often only when something goes wrong, only when something negative happens, only when we're having a panic attack do we actually become aware of our breath. Only when we are physically afflicted do we become aware of parts of the body or systems within the body. And that's not being mindful, is it? As we've practiced over the weeks, being mindful is about being aware of things as they are in this moment, and also being aware of
your feet and not tripping over.
Being aware of the fact that your feet aren't hurting.
They don't belong to me anymore.
Being aware of the fact that you don't have heartburn. It's only when your neck and shoulders become knotted with tension that you actually become aware of them. So we're missing an opportunity to be mindful and to be aware of this body that we have, this fantastic thing that we have, that we are pilots of, I suppose, for the short period of time that we are living on Earth, not wanting to get too spiritual or anything. We miss opportunities to be aware of it, and it's only when it goes wrong that perhaps we become aware. Okay, so the breath. The breath is I'd stick my neck out and say the breath is unaffected. What causes changes to the breath is things that happen in here that our body then responds to and causes us to breathe differently. The breath is the same regardless of our situation, whether we are well off, financially impoverished, sick, well, whatever, extremes of situation or existence you want to bring into it, the breath is the same. The other reasons why breath is important to mindful practice is that the breath connects the outside with the inside. Now, I started off by saying the exercise that we did at the beginning where we engaged the senses was very much about being aware of what's going on around us. And mindfulness is that awareness of the external but also awareness of the internal, so that we become aware and accept how we feel, what our emotional state is, what our physical state is. And the gateway to that can be the breath. So by becoming aware of the breath, you become aware of that transition from external to internal. The air enters the body. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, I breathe in and I come home to my body. It brings you back to this vessel, this thing that you occupy, that you pilot. So that's another key aspect to it. It gives you that path to be able to then be mindful. And if you are sitting and for a prolonged period of time and you want to begin to become aware of what's happening internally here and also here, the breath is the gateway to that. The breath is that great leveller. We are all sat here, we are all breathing the same air. It's something that connects all of us as living beings. It's also the breath that we are taking is the same breath that all of our ancestors took. It's something that connects us with everything that's gone before. Connects us with those previous lives that have been lived. All the way, we've spoken before about the dinosaurs, the breath that the dinosaurs took. It's the same breath, effectively, that we're taking. So it's something that, in terms of, if we want to start thinking about things being transcendental, transcending time, the breath does that. The breath connects the past and the future. But it happens in the present moment, so it allows us to have that connection with everything that's past, with our ancestors, all the rest of it. What makes the breath such a wonderful, mindful tool is the fact that it is always there. There is always a breath happening. Unless you're Jez sat in the truck when the muck spreaders are out and you make a conscious decision.
Well, will come.
And you make a conscious decision not to chew on some of that pig dung infused air. There's always a breath. It's always there for you to bring your awareness to, and by bringing your awareness to it, it instantly transports you to the present moment.
I know I'm chuckling a bit.
You're all right, Jason. I'm ticking them off. It's all right. This is your second one. You're all right. Still all right.
Let's say it was just in a smaller room, and the windows were all closed. There might be one or two of us looking at each other and maybe say, it's getting a bit stuffy because we're getting a bit warm. You'd be aware of that, and you'd be aware of it's not clean.
That's it. It has an impact. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be the same breath, but it'd be maybe different breathing sort of thing.
There are lots of. I mean, if you think about our language, there are lots of words and phrases which hint at the breath. You know, oh, just need to pause to take a breath, or I can't, let's just catch a breath. You know, I'm sure we can sit, I'm sure we can think of lots. And also, I mean, coming back to what you were saying, Jess, quite often we breathe at quite a shallow level. You know, we only ever breathe at the top of our lungs, and we can actually accumulate quite a bit of stagnant air in the base of our lungs. So actually doing some mindful breathing does give you the opportunity to flush out some of that dirty air, so to speak, and feel a little bit invigorated and a little bit restored by getting some fresh air into filling the lungs with fresh air. But coming back to the breath being that useful tool that we can bring our awareness to instantly transport us to the present moment, we can do that at any moment. Any moment, from the moment we open our eyes in the morning to the moment we lay down and actually go to sleep. Any opportunity throughout the day, we can bring our awareness to our breath. And so to bring it back to what I was saying at the very beginning about building up those snapshots of mindfulness rather than necessarily sitting for a great length of time. Because what I find happens, and I don't know whether this is the same as for you, but when I do bring my awareness to my breath, and it does bring me to the present moment, even if I just take 2 or 3 breaths mindfully, and I'm aware of the breath happening just 2 or 3 times, it brings me to the present moment. I actually stay there for a little while afterwards. It's not like you take 3 mindful breaths and you are only mindful for the duration of those 3 breaths. It actually spills over.
It lasts a little while.
It just lasts that little bit longer. Now, if I'm in a situation and I suddenly am aware of the fact that I'm perhaps not in the moment and I'm not being mindful, and so I take a mindful breath because it's there and it's simple and it's free and it's easy to do, it brings me to the moment, and then I stay there for a while. And then throughout, as that situation unfolds, I'm able to be present throughout for the moments of that situation. And so that's what I mean about repeating that all throughout the day, and it adding up to quite a lot. Because even though I maybe take 2 or 3 mindful breaths, which last anywhere between 5 and 10 seconds, depending upon how puffed out I am, if doing that for 5 seconds then means I am present and in the moment for the next 5 minutes, or maybe even longer, 10 minutes, then that's me being mindful for 10 minutes. And if I do that 6 times throughout the day, that's me being mindful for an hour. That's the same as sitting for 3 20-minute meditative sittings. That's the same amount of time.
Just say, Jim, as you know, I've been meditating for years.
Yes.
And you get as much benefit from just a couple of minutes of breathing.
Yeah, you do.
It lasts just as long.
That's it.
As a 20-minute meditation.
Exactly. So you could do that. You could say, right, I'm going to every day I'm going to do 2 or 3 20-minute sittings and meditate. So you've done 40 minutes or an hour a day. But if you do, like as I just said, if you're able to just be aware of your breath, and I try and do it as many times as I can.
The best place is when you're stuck in traffic.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Any time. Any time I remember, I just bring my awareness to my breath. And I don't keep count, but I would imagine it probably happens to me 20 times a day. I'll do that. It's because I've managed to develop it as an involuntary tick now. I just bring my awareness to my breath. But that's what it needs to be like. It just needs to be almost like an unconscious thing that happens. So just bring the awareness to the breath, because then I'm in the moment, and then lingers. And that enables me to spend more of my waking day in the moment. And my aim is, my hope is that eventually I get to the point where all day I'm mindful. My mind wanders and I can notice it, be aware of my breath, bring me to the moment, and then that gives me 10 minutes of being in the moment. And if it wanders off again, breath brings it back and gives me another 10 minutes. And by doing that, that enables me to spend the majority of my day, my waking time, in the moment and aware of the moment. Okay. Does that make sense to people? Does that? Good. Good. So, we should breathe. Having spent half an hour talking about the breath, we should put that into practice. So you may close your eyes if you wish. You don't have to, it's not mandatory. And you may start by being aware of the breath in the nostrils. And aware of the air entering and leaving the body. You can then follow the breath back slightly and be aware of the breath in the neck, in the throat, behind the soft palate. And then aware of the breath at the top of the chest. And here feeling the movement, the rise and fall, the expansion and the contraction of your chest as you breathe in and breathe out. And that movement happens moment by moment. And then you can become aware of the breath right down at the diaphragm. What you could bring to your practice here is actually expelling all of the air, being aware of the diaphragm, pushing all the way up to expel all of the air from your lungs, so that we get rid of any of that stale, old air, fill it with new, fresh air. That happens, you can really be aware of the movement within your body as the diaphragm pushes out. Now become aware of those three components of the breath. You breathe in, you breathe out, and then there is a pause. In, out, and another pause. And for the next few breaths, I'd just like you to be acutely aware of that pause between breaths, aware of the stillness of body, stillness of mind that exists by just being aware of that pause. As you develop your awareness of that pause, I shall invite the ball to sound.